Hi, I'm Dave Miranda, General Counsel and past President of the New York State Bar Association. Welcome to Miranda Warnings. You have the right to remain listening. This week on Miranda Warnings, we're very excited to have Alan Barinholtz, an attorney with Lepla Associates in Dayton, Ohio. He focuses on personal injury and medical malpractice cases in Ohio and Illinois. Welcome, Alan.
Hi, David. How you doing?
It is great to have you with us because Alan is also an actor, and he played Judge Rosen in the series Jury Duty. The show looks at the legal system through the eyes of one real juror surrounded by dozens of actors. The show followed a person by the name of Ronald Gladden, a 29-year-old man living in Los Angeles County, California, as he served on a jury for 3 weeks in a civil liability case. The show has been nominated for 4 Emmy Awards this year, including an Emmy for excellence in casting. And we have one of those excellent cast choices with us today, Judge Rosen from Jury Duty. So before we get to the show, Alan, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your law practice.
Sure. Graduated from Ohio State 50 years ago. Got a BA in theater. And my intention was to move to Manhattan and be a Broadway actor. Did a little stand-up comedy for a year or two. I think I got paid once or twice. And a couple of years after college, I was selling radio time over the telephone. Kind of successful, kind of boring, and having a drink with a buddy of mine who was in law school. He was in town, and I said, gee, it might not be a bad idea to get a law degree just from a business standpoint, but I'm 25 years old. I think I'm too old. And he laughed at me. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, isn't law school kind of like medical school? The older you are, the more difficult it is. He said, I've got men and women in my class in their 40s and 50s. And I said, wow. So I applied to, I think, 4 or 5 law schools. I got accepted to Loyola of Chicago the day my older son was born. And I thought that was a good omen. And the opening day speech that the dean gave, I said, screw using this for business, pardon me. I want to be a lawyer. And so I've been practicing law for all intents and purposes since 1980.
Well, that's great. And you're practicing in Ohio, is that right? You have cases in Ohio and Illinois?
Yeah, I've been licensed in Illinois since 1980. I've been licensed in Ohio, I think, since 2010. The reason I've got a dual license, my wife and I own a farm. I'm not a farmer in Ohio. It's a farm that she grew up on, and I moved there full time. I think in 2018, and I'd been back and forth for a long time, so I thought it'd be prudent to have a license there as well.
So you said you had some small notoriety as a stand-up before you went to law school. So
no, I didn't say small. I said no notoriety.
Oh, no notoriety. Okay.
I think I got paid for it one time.
What kind of bits did you do? What was your best what was your best joke as a stand-up?
Well, jokes are typically for family and friends. I did primarily sketch type bits, observational type comedy. But I did win a contest once for telling a joke on a radio station. The joke is, guy goes to the doctor. The doctor says, I've got bad news and worse news. He said, what's the bad news? He says, well, you've got an incurable disease and you'll be dead within 24 hours. He said, my God, what's worse than that? He said, well, I tried calling you yesterday. and I wound up winning a $150 pair of Timberland shoes.
You still have them?
I still have them, yes.
Well, the show was very funny.
Yes, thank you.
Very funny. And you played the judge. You were very judgy, right? So it was good casting. Tell us, how did you come to get selected to be on the show as a practicing attorney? Obviously with some background in theater, but that it seemed like a circuitous path to get to the show.
Yeah, I at the time I'm semi-retired. I was probably doing about 10 hours of work a week. Primarily, I do a lot of arbitrations for AAA 3-person panels. I've done some arbitrations as an arbitrator for FINRA. but I still had a PI practice because I've got clients from decades ago that will call me, or they'll have friends or family call me. And my wife and I always go to Los Angeles at Thanksgiving. My older son and my younger son both live here. I've got 5 grandkids out here. And both my sons are in the business. They're actors, they're writers, they're pretty successful. And I got a phone call a couple of days before we were coming to LA, and my older son, Ike, said, "Hey, remember Allison Bills?" I said, "Yeah, Allison and Jennifer. I've done legal work for their family. I know they're members of the improv community." He said, "Well, Allison works for a showrunner." And the showrunner asked her, "Do you know any judges or attorneys who are retired or semi-retired who have any kind of improv experience?" And she said, "Well, yeah, actually, our family attorney, when his sons come into town, you probably know his sons. He'll get up on stage and do some stuff with his kids." And then it got back to Ike. "Hey, you see if your pop is interested in submitting a tape?" And I said, "What do I have to do?" He said, "Well, when you're here this week, you'll go up to my office. You'll do a 1-minute riff on, you'll act as a judge." And I said, "Yeah, okay, fine." I got there. My sons and my wife helped me out a little bit. My son said, "Well, tell us about the most extraordinary trial you've ever tried, Your Honor." And I channeled a few of the judges back from Cook County, and I submitted the tape. And the next day, I got an email from the casting people saying, "You're a strong pin for the judge." And I said, "Oh, great." Then I said to my kids, "What does that mean?" And they said, "They're seriously considering you." And about a month later, they called and they said, "We'd like you to do this if you can come to LA for a couple of months."
Wow.
And my wife said, "Get out of here, go do it."
Yeah, that's great. Good for her, and good for them, and good for you. You were a great judge.
Thank
the
you.
show was so crazy. How did you keep a straight face, right? How did you keep a straight face because you were all actors except for the one jury foreman, right?
Yeah.
And so he thought it was like a documentary that you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the premise. That's why he didn't think it odd that there were cameras in the courtroom. But as you see in the last episode, not only were there
Right.
cameras in the courtroom, there were hidden cameras all over.
Right.
And the one time I almost lost it. If you're familiar with the scene where Todd, the eccentric inventor, comes in with the chair pants.
Yeah. Right.
I started chuckling, and I did all I could to keep from cracking up. And yeah, it was real tough.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, I would think if a juror came in like that in real life, it would probably be funny as well, right? So
I don't know how they would let him get past. In Cook County, I think the Cook County sure would say, "Get the hell out of here."
So for those who haven't seen the show, I mean, maybe you could explain the premise. I'd be happy to go into it, but you could explain the
Sure.
premise. So if they haven't seen it.
So apparently, a couple of years ago, some of the creators sent out a blast on something like Craigslist or something like that, saying that if you've never served on a jury before and you want to apply, you don't have to be a California resident. And you'll apply if you qualify. We're shooting a documentary of a real trial, and we'll pay you $400 a day if you so qualify, plus your travel expenses. And apparently 2,500 people applied. They bought that premise, and they're lay people. So obviously, as attorneys, that kind of would never happen. I can't see somebody from Kentucky serving on an LA jury.
Of course, right.
They bought that premise, and a bunch of people applied, and this young man, Ronald Gladden, was chosen. And he came to, we had rehearsals for 2 weeks prior to him getting there.
And when you say we, so you were the judge. He was one of 12 jurors.
Plus two alternates.
Plus 2 alternates, which became significant and throughout the series.
Correct.
And they were all actors.
Yeah, they were all improvisers, and
right.
Pretty much unknown, with the exception of James Marsden, who's well known.
I feel like there's a chance that I might be an unwelcome distraction.
Why is that, sir?
I'm a recognizable public figure.
Respectfully, I don't recognize you. I'm sorry. Who are you?
That's okay. A lot of people do. My most recent movie is this movie, Sonic the Hedgehog, and this gentleman and I were just chatting about it earlier and yesterday, and he's a big fan, and we.
You were talking to this gentleman. Did you stand up? Do you know who this fella is?
I do, yeah. It took me a little bit to notice him yesterday, but I recognized him, yes.
And he played himself. He played a dickish version, if I'm allowed to say that, of himself. And he did it quite, I mean, he did it well enough. Yeah, he's been nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy. So that's great.
That's great. So then you had this person, Ron Gladden, who was the only person on the show that was not acting, that he was being himself.
Correct.
And when I heard about the show, you know the premise, and I thought, well, this isn't going to be particularly interesting because I know the reveal. But it was fascinating because the actors really were improvising, I think. And this gentleman, Ron Gladden, was such a nice guy, right? Was he really like, he was really a nice guy, right?
As genuine as the day is long.
He was so earnest about,
Yes.
he was so he was selected to be foreman of the jury by you, which is not typical, right?
No, and again, a layperson probably wouldn't get that. And I actually said to the producers, I said, guys, the jurors choose the foreperson. They said, we got it, don't worry. And I said, okay, fine, it's your show, not mine. And it worked out very well.
Right. So you said, so before the trial that we viewed, and it was I think an 8-part series.
Correct.
Before the trial started, you had 2 weeks of prep. Right?
Correct.
Is that what you said? And was this kind of scripted, or did you have like alternate scripts, or did you have, how much of it was scripted and how much of it was improvised?
I'm going to say probably 85% off the cuff, 15% scripted. There were certain beats that you had to follow. So the premise was the courthouse was somewhat dilapidated. They found a closed courthouse in Huntington Park in Los Angeles. And apparently they got permission from the city to kind of revamp it a tiny bit, but it still looked dilapidated. And the premise was the courthouse, as soon as this trial is over, it's shut down for good. This is my last trial after 30 some odd years on the bench. And that's that. And that's why I've allowed a documentary crew to come in and film this civil trial. And so that was kind of the overview. And then we were given certain beats again, if you will. We knew that Marsden was going to be cast as an alternate. He wasn't going to get off the jury. He was going to try to frustrate the process. That's why the paparazzi come, et cetera, et cetera. There was sequestration, which actually worked in getting rid of everybody's cell phones and iPads. So everybody, I mean, in reality, Ronald was the only one who truly was without it. And the sheriff's deputy said, every night you'll be allowed to, make a certain number of calls. We're kind of going to be around to monitor, et cetera, et cetera. And a few of the actors had an earpiece in. So, for example, I had an earpiece in that couldn't be seen. And if, let's say, for example, the attorneys were going on too long or something in the courtroom needed to move along, Jake Szymanski, the director, would say, get the attorney's attention. We got to do something. And I would say, counsel, could you approach? And they would approach, and I would basically say, cut this line of questioning or whatever. So
that's just like real life.
That's exactly correct. And if something was going wrong where the other jurors suspected that Ronald was trying to catch on, they'd let the director know. So maybe they shifted that. And I think the chair pants thing, one of the intentions was they were going to try to let that go as long as possible and possibly have Ronald sit there for the entire trial. I'm sorry, David sit there for the entire trial with his chair pants on. They knew that was going to be a bridge too far.
Yeah, so the chair pants was one of the jurors was like an amateur inventor. and he kept coming in each day with a different invention. And one day he came in with what were described as chair pants, right? So pants that you would able to adjust and sit without actually having a chair. And he was walking around with these chair pants on his legs, and it caused a disruption. And I think you, as a judge, asked him to remove his chair pants, right, and he had to go in the corner of the room and remove them.
Are you standing up, sir?
No, Your Honor, I'm sort of in between standing and sitting. I'd like to sit. I wanted to comply.
What's the problem with the chair?
There's no problem with the chair, Your Honor. I'm just, I have a attachment, a device that I can't sit in the chair.
So that I don't think ordinarily happens.
Not in any trial I've ever been involved.
I have a question for you. In the first episode, you cut your hand.
Yeah.
Was that part of the script, or did you really cut your hand? Why did that happen?
So what the premise was, and they didn't show it fully, when Ronald came to the courthouse, when he was bussed there, and he was standing outside with several jurors, what the production crew had set up, they're standing in the parking lot, and a woman walks by with a baby stroller, and she closes the stroller and she puts it over her shoulder, and she breaks the car window, and it's my car window. Shatters. And they didn't show that. So then, and Ronald presumably saw this.
And that was unscripted. The breaking of your window was unscripted?
No, that was a setup.
Oh, that was a setup.
That was
okay.
a setup, but Ronald didn't obviously know it was a setup. And then at lunchtime, I go out and Marsden tries to get my attention to curry favor with me so he can get off the jury, and I kind of shoo him away. Then I go to my car, and again, they don't show this. I put my hand inside the window. They had a little blood packet there. I put something on my hand. I wrapped it in a paper towel, and then I went back past the lunch wagon with this bloody hand. And in order to sustain it for the entire 3 weeks, I always had to have my hand wrapped. And after about a week, it went to just a Band-Aid. And I don't know if they showed this in the last episode where they're talking to Ronald after everything, but he asked me, he said, "Did you really cut your hand?" And I said, right. No, I didn't. So,
but the hand cutting didn't really move the story in any direction.
The only thing it did, David, and again, I don't think they showed this, when we were doing voir dire, I immediately I was real kind and I was real nice, and I let go of the woman who was in her 90s. They said, "You don't have to stay." And the guy who said, "I have an operation," and the woman said, "I have to pick up my kids. You're dismissed, you're dismissed." After I cut my hand, I came back and I was grumpy. I told Marsden to sit down. I told the guy, "You're not getting out." Okay. So that was that premise.
I see. So that was for your change in temperament before and after. So this was 8 episodes. I forget how long they were, maybe 35, 40 minutes
Correct.
Each. And how many hours of taping did you have?
Oh, boy.
That this was whittled down to maybe 5 or 6 hours.
Hundreds
of hours.
I mean,
right.
An average day was at least 8 to 10 hours a day. And typically we would get there at least a couple of hours before Ronald got there, just to talk over what happened, that day, what we need to consider and concentrate on. And then, sometimes we started at 6:15 in the morning and got out at 7 o'clock at night. There were hundreds of hours of tape.
Now, my understanding is that you also did a lot of preparation when Ron Gladden wasn't there, right? So you would have so if the court had a day off, you guys would still be working
correct
on preparing what the alternatives for the next scene would be.
Witnesses. There was a scene where the female influencer, and they didn't show this, she's sitting on the witness stand and she recognizes Marsden, who's sitting in the gallery, and she starts looking at him. She says, "James." And I'm, writing, not paying attention. She said, "Is that you?" And then I say, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, James, it's me. I was at a party." And I told her to shut up. I said, sir, get up here. And there's this whole colloquy that I wish they would show that in these scenes that were cut. It was hilarious.
Right, the outtakes. So you had a full trial. You had a plaintiff and a defendant, and they each had attorneys.
Correct.
And my understanding is that attorneys were actors, but they were at one point were also attorneys in real life.
Trish LaFache, who played plaintiff's counsel, she worked in Manhattan before she went to Hollywood not many years ago, but several years ago. She did criminal defense work, if memory serves me. Evan Williams still has his license. He's still affiliated with, I believe, a New Orleans PI firm. He's also a writer. He helped write the show. So yeah, they had both attorneys.
Now, did you have situations where, because the factual premise and some of the antics that occurred were truly bizarre but humorous. Did you have situations between yourself and the other two attorneys that were formerly attorneys say this would never happen? We can't do this. This would never.
I'm kind of a stickler for the rules of evidence simply because I've been a trial lawyer for 40 years. Them not so much. So I would get comments, don't object to, and don't, to the one attorney saying to the other, don't object too much because, we can't. And I said, wait a second, if what he's saying is clearly hearsay and this guy doesn't object, what the hell? But Evan played a very incompetent attorney.
Yes, he did.
And he's the opposite. And so, yeah, we had a lot of discussion about objecting and not objecting and how far could this go.
So he was a good actor because he did seem very incompetent. And I loved the scene at the beginning when he was trying to they were trying to do a video representation of the incident.
Yes.
And it was just a horrible graphic, and he broke the TV screen, and everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong.
And in fact, nobody they told me Evan's going to knock the TV over. The jury did not know that.
So at the end, the defendant ends up doing his own closing, right? Because his attorney was so incompetent, he does his own closing.
Yes, and I got to use, he was going back and forth like Woody Allen did in Bananas. And that's when I said to him, I said, young man, this is not Bananas. And it was very funny.
That is a great scene, actually, in Bananas. So, were there times when you or the producers felt that things were going so bizarre that Ron was going to figure this out, that this was just a setup? Did you get nervous?
I said to them, I said, I think the chair pants is a bridge too far. And they allowed it only insofar as, okay, take them off in the courtroom. We're not going to sit with them. When Ben, the defendant, did his own closing, then they had Whitney, who played the plaintiff. They then said, well, let her do her rebuttal. And I said, no, I thought that was absurd.
Right.
But, I'm obviously overruled, and I guess it played out okay. So,
well, I thought the rebuttal was hilarious. I mean, as far as the show goes, so now the defendant does his own closing.
Right.
And then it looked like all the facts were leaning towards the plaintiff in this case, going up to that point. I mean, the defendant had his own mother come on, and she testified against him.
He kind of did.
And then so at the last minute, the plaintiff decides she's going to do her own rebuttal, even though her attorney was perfectly competent.
Yes.
And she just tanked it.
He
right?
did. I think that kind of sent it over the edge.
So now we get to the final episode, and you played the crucial role in the dramatic reveal to Ron, and that was really the centerpiece of the whole show. Was that moment?
Well, thank you.
When you do the reveal.
As I said weeks ago when you first entered this courtroom that this was the last trial of my career. What I didn't tell you is it's also the first, because I'm not a real judge. And you're not a real foreperson. This is not a real case.
What?
Each of your fellow jurors, as well as the defendant, the plaintiff, bailiff Nikki, myself, we're all actors. Everything you saw was carefully planned. What I'm saying is, it was all fake, except for one important element. You.
How did you prepare for that? And how much was scripted and how much was ad-lib by you? And then did you have concern about how Ron was going to react?
I'll answer the second question first. I had concern, and the director, the producers had concern. And what they said, and I don't think they showed this in the last episode, they said that if he looks like he's freaking out or if he can't take this, because, you know, if you've been living with people for 3 weeks and all of a sudden, even though we didn't say you've been pranked, you realize you've been pranked, you have no idea how this person is going to react. And they said, if it starts going south, tell him, you know what, Ronald, this is a lot to take in. If you want to come on with me and sit in my chambers for a few minutes just to gather your thoughts. And I did say that. And he said, no, I think I'm okay. So there was some concern there. A lot of that reveal was scripted with some improv. But that was the most nervous I was during the entire production. I got to be honest, David, I wasn't nervous except for the reveal. That made me more nervous than anything.
Well, it was very dramatic. You did it in a nice way. I think you said some, very nice things about Ron, which I think were all deserved. Plus, you threw in $100,000, which always makes things go down a little smoother.
Doesn't hurt.
So that was good. Now, did you have a chance to talk to Ron, like just privately afterwards, about some of his feelings? Sure. And what was his reaction to going through this?
Like I said, he looked at me and he said, "So you really didn't hurt your hand?" I mean, all these little things. He's wondering what happened. He's just the kindest person. And the great thing is that Ronald has maintained relationships with a number of the cast members since the show. And he's just a good guy.
Right. So they were all really sequestered?
No,
right?
No.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was I said, tomorrow you'll be sequestered. And because we couldn't get this done in time, 5 of you are going to go to this hotel. The remainder are going to go to this hotel.
Oh.
So those 5 were sequestered. They got in the bus. They took them. The other 9 or whatever got in another bus. That bus drove around the block until the other bus left, and then they came back and went home.
Oh, so only the 5 were sequestered.
Correct.
And one of those 5 was Marsden, though, right? Because wasn't it?
Oh, yes. So Marsden was going to get sequestered with those 5, but then, if you recall, he said he got permission from the sheriff's deputy to have his own private deputy with him.
Right. He paid for his own
Correct.
Private security, right? So then it would only be only him and 3 others that were.
No, it was Todd. It was Edie, who was tempting this very religious young man. It was Ronald, and I can't think of the other person offhand. And Marsden came back to the hotel to do some rehearsal with Ronald for a movie he was trying to get in.
So this was really, now when you were doing this, did you think, oh, this is going to be a hit, or were you thinking this is going to be ridiculous? What were your thoughts going through the process? Did you think that they had something, or did you think that I don't know what this is?
In my wildest dreams, I never imagined that it would take off the way it has taken off. I joined the Screen Actors Guild when I got cast. So I finally became a union person after, during my entire life. And I just thought, you know what? I'm acting. I wanted to act 50 years ago, and now I'm doing it. And who knows what's going to happen? But David, for the life of me, I don't think anyone ever thought it would catch fire like it did.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned the Screen Actors Guild, and we're in the middle of an important Screen Actors Guild strike.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that from your perspective. You just joined, and now you're on strike suddenly.
I called a cousin of mine. He said, "What are you doing today?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Ike's house, my older son." I said, and then we're going to the picket line. And there was a pause, and I said, "You know what? I never thought I would say that sentence in my entire life." I joined the union, and I've marched on the picket line, and it's good. It's not only good, it's important. It's what we in the Screen Actors Guild are trying to achieve, in my opinion, eclipses all the success of everything. It's about fairness, it's about residuals, it's about AI, and now I'm doing something that I never thought I would do, and it's really, really important. We're going to be going, a group of us tomorrow will be going to Amazon. A group of the jury duty actors will be going to Amazon and just make our voices heard. It's really important.
So you and some of the other actors that you worked with on jury duty are having a reunion now at Amazon. In support of the guild.
It's in support of the SAG and AFTRA and the writers as well. And I don't know how long this is going to last. Both my sons are in both unions, and the Writers Guild has been on strike since May. We've only been on strike a little over a week, and it could go a long time. We'll see. But we're fighting the good fight, and it's really important.
Right. Well, I certainly respect your support for the Screen Actors Guild, but I wonder, do you have anything else? Any other acting that's on the horizon? Obviously, all that would be on hold now, but do you have anything that you think you might either be trying out for
Sure.
Should the strike end, or anything else that you have your eyes on?
A couple of things. Before the strike, there's a TV show called Physical. I shot an episode of that. There's a pilot that is going to be made into a show this fall. I shot an episode of that. And then the labor issues hit, and everything is on hold. I'm comfortable with the success of the show, that once everything ends, I think there'll be some work. As I said, if Law and Order were shot in LA, I'd probably have a full-time gig as a judge. So.
Right. Well, you did a great job. You have a great judicial temperament, and the show was great, Jury Duty, and you're a great judge. And we couldn't be more happy to have you here talking about the show Jury Duty. Alan Barinholtz, Judge Rosen on Jury Duty on Miranda warnings. Thanks so much, Alan.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. This is fantastic.
This has been Miranda Warnings, a New York State Bar Association podcast. You have the right to subscribe, rate, and review.